Hi, welcome to the Innersparx Podcast. Today we're joined by Benjamin Smith, an accomplished arts leader, composer, entrepreneur, and educator whose career spans over 2 decades of creative innovation and community building. From founding the Orchard on 6th and directing the Tacoma Urban Orchestra to mentoring Suzuki piano students who have gone on to professional careers, Benjamin blends artistry with leadership. He creates spaces where creativity, discipline, and collaboration thrive, whether through immersive performances, cross-disciplinary projects, or innovative programs that connect people of all ages. His work demonstrates how to combine consistent habits, a refined structure, and creative vision, and how that equips individuals to not only excel themselves, but to elevate everyone around them. I'm super excited to get going with Benjamin. Let's dive into it to asking him about performance, what it means to be a performer, and how he maintains habits and structures to perform at his best throughout his career. Thank you so much for joining, Benjamin. I really appreciate you, again, taking the time out. I want to dive more into then the journey of you as a performer, because I'm sure there were lessons that you learned through teaching that then you translated into your own performance. Am I correct in thinking that?
Definitely,
and So you said you started coaching at mid-20s?
Yeah, I mean, I like, as a 18, 19-year-old, I was, working with like my sister and other people, but I hadn't received training, like official teacher training. It was just, kind of friends and family. Like the transition. So what happened for me is I started becoming more and more interested in the structure of the music that I was teaching. And I teach a method called the Suzuki method. It's all based on classical music. And as I was playing that music and teaching it, I got really interested in like how these composers from the past, they had these ideas and they wanted to communicate them musically. Like, how did they do that? That got me on this journey of studying with a composer, a mentor. Again, I wasn't really looking to be a performer, but I was very interested in composing, in working with all of these kids, trying to help them understand the music and not just sort of do it by rote, and then also helping them to play from their heart. I learned that talking about structure or helping them feel or understand the structure of the music that they were playing was helpful to them. And so that kind of like started pushing me towards actually writing out music, trying to create some musical structures of my own.
Yeah, it's interesting because learning how to teach has made me now reflect onto what do I value, what do I value as a teacher, what do I value as a performer. And it's been curious. I've been bouncing around this idea a lot of where does it start? And you said something that I want to get back to, which you said you taught them how to play from their heart. I want to hear your thoughts then on what does it mean then to play from the heart? How do you teach that? How can you conceptualize that and feel it? How do you feel that?
Well, for me personally, how I feel that is when I feel like I am sort of in resonance with my environment, and that includes the people that I'm around, in a performance context. If I can sort of amplify that feeling for myself and somehow ignite it, right? And I think that's where like practice and, trying things out before you get to the performance stage is important. If you kind of, feel that resonance, and for me, the last few years have been performing only in very special, curated, natural spaces outdoors. And so that's kind of easy. It's kind of a shortcut to that. But then igniting that feeling and then blending like all the technical things that I've sort of stockpiled and learned and refined over lots of practice and lots of off performance time. So there's, a lot of background. So before my first performance, I did 40 in front of the camera, shared publicly, kind of tryouts, basically. Like I did the same sort of thing 40 times over the course of about 2 years before I did my first live performance. And so there's all this practice and seeing what other people can resonate with. So I'm feeling this resonance and I'm like ignited and I'm on fire and I'm like, I've got this thing to share, but not everybody has the same background or the same experiences. And so I had to learn over time, like what things resonated with other people as well. And then from there, I try very hard to have an empty mind and just trust that what comes out is going to work. But it's not just going in blind, it's not going in and winging it. It's like, 40 iterations and then try to play what naturally arises.
Yeah. And so you're now the second musician that I've interviewed. And
Oh, wow.
the guy before
Okay.
I was telling you about over the phone, his
Yes.
name is Diego Garcia, and he plays guitar. He trained in Spain. He said a very similar thing to what you just said, where it was rely on your hard work. He said, do your homework, but then leave like 10% up to just what comes.
Yes.
He said, leave it up to luck. And that in his performance, he doesn't want to know what's coming next because that's the excitement that keeps the fire burning.
I 100% agree.
Was this something that you had naturally as you began to perform? Is this something that you had to teach yourself? Is this something that over the years you've refined? Let's talk a little bit more about the process in getting to this. And I guess the other question would be, why is it important for you to play from your heart?
I think it's been just a progression. And I think it's kind of similar to, so I have a 7-year-old daughter. She's like my favorite human in the entire world. To me, I feel like my process and progression as a performer is very similar to watching her learn how to formulate ideas even before she was verbal and try to communicate those, get better and better at that. And now she can like tell stories. The process for me was I had to learn what my instrument could do, the piano. So then I studied intellectually and physically by playing, but also analyzing the structure of these pieces. And I did that for years, like over 20 years. They're the same pieces that any classical pianist would play. And I'm also teaching those same pieces to every kid that starts also learns Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So I'm like sort of saturated in this very traditional repertoire and the pieces and the structure. It's very cyclical. And so I found a lot of joy in performing those pieces. Maybe like 20 years ago. But I was very, very interested in composition. And so I performed classical music. Then I started composing. I would write everything out. And that's a very sort of classical approach. You take the ideas, the structure, the feelings, you put it on the page, and then you play it note for note. And so one of my albums is that way. Like I wrote out all the notes. I might have had a little bit of improv in there. And then and that was deeply fulfilling. I really enjoyed it. And I remember after I did that project, I had an actual dream. Like I was dreaming that I was on stage with a piano, and I felt this deep freedom to play more from my body, more from my senses. And it wasn't from the page. It wasn't like from memorized music. I was improvising. And that feeling, that was years and years ago. I've kind of been looking for.
Mm.
And I've experienced it now. I now go into nature. I spend time in the space, listening. and then do an musical experience there that is improvised. So that's been sort of the process. And the funny thing is, it's so cyclical for me. Now I'm looking at writing music out again. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do it or not, but I've spent a few years just total improv. But it's based on all this other structured stuff. And now I'm looking at, well, what am I sort of called to? How do I share what I'm feeling and musically?
Yeah, that is such a quest or a journey to tap into your emotions, to your
Mm-hmm.
body, like what you said earlier, playing from the heart. What techniques or practices do you do to tune in with your body?
For me recently, it's been just walking through the forest and trying to experience it with as many senses as I can. So I'm that weird guy who will I know that this like fungus over here you can actually eat. So like go over and touch it and like maybe smell it and might even eat it, because I'm trying to get that input through my senses. In Japan, they call it I think Shinrin Yoku.
Yeah, you're saying you find it fulfilling in that it keeps you in touch with your own body.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me that I have a body.
Oh my
and
God, dude, that's such a good point.
and also there's the understanding that I'm not just a mind traveling through life.
Sounds like the theme of just kind of everything we've been talking about is mindfulness.
Yeah.
Right? Just being mindful of your body, your heart, the music that you're playing, the music that you're learning, the sounds of nature, being out in nature, the tea, everything. Do you feel like that has a big impact on your performance?
But how I think that it's helping me is it's making me more responsive to the environment that I'm in, and aware that that I'm also affecting the environment. That being the people or the creative space, the animals, the trees, everything. And so, I mean, I would hope that these things, just being mindful, being in my body, being in the now. The other word is play. Like I'm trying to play. I'm trying to, um, and I think in the mindfulness community, you can have people who are very, very playful and like fun, and then you can have like this other a little more serious minded mindfulness. And I've sort of experienced both. I've kind of been both, and I'm in a much more playful state these days, and I think it's having a young kid around.
And we chatted about this a little bit over the phone too, but really the point of this podcast, everything that I'm exploring with my business and performance is finding overlap between what can we learn from athletic performance, musical performance, corporate performance, even a coaching performance as we coach our clients to experience similar things that we do. How can we find overlap and learn from each other? Because I believe everybody is a performer, no matter who you are, where you're from, and that there's certain techniques, tools, I don't want to call them tips and tricks, but certain things that we can do to really optimize and fully live into that performance. And mindfulness is 100% one, because if we're thinking about our performance, if we're thinking about performing in front of a million people on stage and we're not present, what kind of a performance would that be? Doubt it would be one that anybody would want to come back to. Or if we're presenting a big meeting or a big pitch, and we're not in it, again, I'm sure it wouldn't get the full idea across. Or if we're playing a sport, right? This whole idea of performance being similar across the board, but different in its own respective, where there is time to be serious, there is time to be playful, there's time to be mindful, and maybe there's also time to be absent-minded and just let things flow. And this has just been such a fun journey to go on and to explore different levels of performances. And I'd like to ask you, what then, with mindfulness involved, with your years of coaching, with your years of then performing, how would you classify a high performer?
I would classify a high performer as in musician land as someone who can listen at an extremely high level, like can hear very, very subtle um, differences, uh, and and then is able to physically, magically, somehow manipulate those through the structure of like harmony and melody and rhythm, right? So music is, you have like chords or multiple instruments playing together in harmony. Then you have a melody usually, and then you have rhythm patterns. So music by itself is not all that complex, but I think the very highest uh, performers, or the people who inspire me the most, kind of demonstrate through their music, whether it's recorded or live, that they are just listening, um, and making these very, very just minuscule micro adjustments to things that intuitively make the whole better. So they have this extreme detail orientation, but they're able to keep the whole, um, keep us all in this journey. Music's very ethereal. It starts and it ends, and it doesn't continue. There's the sound, and then it's gone. And so I think a great musician has, like I said, this sort of big view, and is able to, or if they don't have the view in mind, they're able to intuitively take us on this journey. Um, but I do believe it requires a lot of attention to very, very small details, and that's mostly through listening.
Being in tune, per
Yeah,
se, but
yeah,
then not getting lost in the details.
yes. The forest through the trees.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Do you think that's something that you can coach, or that's something that just comes as an innate ability?
I believe it can be coached. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think, um, like how I'm thinking about it, this year is in like a five-sided pentagram. So the bottom would be the purpose. So the coach has to sort of, whether it's shared with the client or not, the coach has to have the purpose. And one of my big purposes, how do I get my students to listen at a high level? So we do all sorts of games, because I'm working with 3-year-olds and 9-year-olds, and it has to be like gamified. And then like over here, um, I have to have a plan. Like, so it's not just we just listen. It's like, well, we listen in this way. We're going to work on these specific things that we're listening, and it always relates to the piece they're working on. And then over here, next side, we have practice. So there has to be discipline, right, for these sorts of things. We try to have a lot of fun, but end of the day, there is some monotony, right? There's some sameness, because unfortunately, we're not at the level where you can just plug in a Neuralink and be able to play classical piano. I mean, maybe fortunately, probably fortunately.
Probably fortunately. And we might be there sooner than we all think. So
But so yeah, there has to be practice, and practice is, I believe, informed by experience, years of experience, seeing what works with most people, and then refining it down to the individual. And then there has to be performance. There has to be some sort of metric, uh, to say, okay, so you are listening, or in this piece right here, you're showing me that you're listening at a high level. Um, and that, I believe, that only in music can come through performance, whether that's the student performing in the lesson space, the environment, or, ideally, in front of their peers. Um, I try to have performances, multiple times a year where we kind of put these things uh, out in front of people, and we try them out in real time. And then the fifth thing would be perspective. Like, okay, so then we kind of go through all of that, and then it's like, well, what? I usually talk to the parents and the child and say, what do you really want? And we've done all these things after the performance. It's like, you're learning these things, we're meeting these goals. You did great in this area, but what, what's important to you? And then that loops right back to purpose. And then we just keep doing that over and over and over. And I realized that I never really wrote that out um, before this year, but that's what almost all of the great coaches, mentors, and teachers that I worked with over the years and still work with. That's their process. So I'm just, I just wrote it out.
Yeah, that's a beautiful process, and there's a very similar thread with the work that I do with my clients. It's a very similar loop. I like to approach it with, I call it the 4 E's. So
Ooh, okay.
it's explore. So
Okay.
what's working for you? What's not
Mhm.
working for you? Let's establish then a plan or action through practice. Let's enhance it. Let's go back through then once we have an
Yeah.
established plan of the
Yeah.
basics. Let's go back and enhance it.
Mhm.
And then let's expand. Let's see what else can we add in. And once we add it in and we look, then we keep exploring and we say, okay, this is working, this isn't working, what's going on? How can we then establish new routines? How can we establish new habits, plans, systems? And again, it's one of those
Yeah.
cycles that go on forever. So when you then think about from this teaching perspective to your own performance, what do you do
Sure.
to prep? Let's say you've got a big show.
Mhm.
How do you prep for it?
What I have done over the last couple of years is understand that my purpose is to engage the people who come and myself, and to bring us closer to nature, and I would say closer to God, closer to ourselves through this experience. So it's kind of a lofty goal. It's a big purpose. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish. And then my plan includes going to the location and listening to the nature, feeling, touching, tasting, experiencing it. Sometimes just laying down underneath the tree and trying to get a feeling for what is there. Not so much through daydreaming, but through um, trying to experience what's really there, and then leaving, rehearsing on my own and going, okay, so what did that tree feel like? I noticed that there were birds that went by. What were they sounding like? How might I represent those musically in a way that seems, authentic and kind of true to who I am and what my experience is, and that other people might experience. Not that they would go, "Oh, that's the birds" when he plays that, but that they would feel something of what I'm feeling when I think about birds flying. So I, rehearse that, practice that at home on my own, and then day of, then I'm going into the space and just tweaking things. I probably mess around with where I sit in the natural spot many times to try to figure out, even day of, like, is this truly the best place to play? Where am I putting the speaker and that kind of thing, so that we can create this sort of natural amphitheater sort of effect. And then after that, I try very hard to not um, obsess about the small details after that. And that's probably my biggest struggle. Because I'm like, okay, I've done all of this. I need to trust that when I step into that space with other souls who are there to experience not just my performance, but to experience nature together, that I will be able to hear and resonate and play. It's a bit nerve-wracking. Even talking about it now, I'm feeling a little nervous. I'm like, oh, yeah, because I feel like there's no page, there's no. I try very hard, even though I've rehearsed, to then not uh, play by rote, um, and to play by what happens there and then. And to me, those sorts of experiences are the most alive experiences for me right now. That's kind of the process.
Well, I was going to ask, do you prepare your body in any sort of way?
Yeah, so I like doing yoga. Playing the piano is fairly stationary. The whole upper body gets a little can get stiff for me. So usually I'll stretch, do some yoga, stretch out. I'm a big fan for myself, and I know it doesn't work for a lot of people, most of the people around me, but of intermittent fasting.
Oh yeah.
And so like before, like day of, I'll eat very, very light, or maybe not at all. Just keep very hydrated, electrolytes, that sort of thing, and wait to kind of have a celebratory meal afterwards. And since I'm trying to really be in my senses and in what's actually in nature, not in my imagination or daydreaming. I don't use any substances, nothing that's going to like heighten or dampen my senses. I'm trying to actually be in the body that I have, in the space, and that's I work with so many, in music. Substances are a huge thing. Most of us have either experimented or regularly use substances to enhance sort of the experience. But I found with this iteration that I'm trying to do it from who I am naturally, uh, in that space, and that's another thing. And I try to get sleep the night before. Doesn't always happen.
What about from a stress related standpoint?
I've had a lot of high stress moments in my life. I think most of us have in our modern life. I've learned different sort of breathing techniques, and sort of these mindfulness techniques. And what I found works the best is just simple box breathing. So when like I get elevated, um, I also try to tell myself that I'm not scared and not nervous, because that can sort of spiral into, well, what am I scared of? What am I nervous of? But these fingers are not going to do what I want them to do when I, sit down in the forest with all these eyeballs on me. I try to tell myself that I'm feeling the excitement of the
Mhm.
adventure, and try to teach that to the kids I work with too.
Track and field coach in college used to say, turn the butterflies into dragons.
Ooh, love that.
Before every race, before every event, it was always like, and then just, okay, you've done the work, you've done the practice.
Yes.
The performance should be the fun part. Waking up at 6 a.m. and running hills on Wednesday, that was the hard, monotonous stuff. Performance on the weekend, that's the fun, and when you can
Yeah.
really enjoy and fall back on the systems and the training and everything that you've done throughout the
Mhm.
week.
Yeah, in the method that I was trained in and study, the Suzuki method, the founder talks about this Japanese concept of, I think it's transliterated as ki, but it's this kind of like intuitive action, and that's a big part of what all of us Suzuki teachers are trying to help our students develop is, and that would be like playing from the heart. Like you do something, it becomes internalized, and then you can do it in different settings without thinking about the physical aspects. And so I would say that Yeah, I try to remind myself of those sorts of things, but to varying success. Usually it takes me a few minutes once I sit down and start playing. And what I've been doing is giving myself like some ambient space. So I'll like create like a almost like a patch sort of sound, like a sort of like a string or synth sound that just sort of resonates, and I don't have to do too much, and I can kind of let myself start getting into that space that we're all there for. I started incorporating incense as well, which was very
Hmm.
helpful for me because I've used incense over the years with meditation.
So you have then
Yeah,
3 tips then for that practice, or 3 practices that you've just found work wonders, or that you teach your students. What's kind of the first 3 things? Because everybody could use a little bit more resources when it comes to mindfulness. It's so hard these days,
yeah.
especially. So I live in the city, I live in DC, just
Mm-hmm.
constantly being stimulated. Of there needs to also be a time where you can just sit and
Mm-hmm.
check in with yourself, feel your body, play from the heart in your own life. So, what would be your 3 techniques to start learning how to play from your heart?
I say number one for me is to have a daily practice of checking in with where I'm at. So how I do that is I have a notebook, and I free form just write stream of consciousness or whatever's coming up for me. But that's like the first thing I do. I've done it for decades. It comes from Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, and that's helped me to center and also to understand just who I am in this life. So that would be number one. Have some sort of a practice, where you are with yourself and you're with your thoughts, and you can, as it were, just let them be, or you can analyze. And so number two is you'll find those things, and they might change. For me, they change kind of year to year, that just bring true happiness and joy. And for me, some of that is not related at all to these things that we were talking about. Um, I love rocks right now. and I'm planning a trip to go dig up petrified wood, and I think having those things that kind of like make me smile and make me feel good, um, outside of like this discipline and this path and these things that take up a lot of time, is very important, like hobbies. And then third, I think for me the biggest thing is be feeling like a deep connection to my calling and my purpose in life. And we didn't talk too much about that, but um, I feel that the reason why I'm doing these things is very, very important to me. There's lots of paths in life, and for me, I feel like music and creating music and sharing music is something that I'm here on earth to do. And I think if you can, for especially people who are younger, in their late teens, 20s, if you can find that, that's going to make all this other stuff worth doing. And and if you have other people like making you do things, and you're not feeling a deep resonance to your what you are doing as a calling or as a purpose, I feel like it's going to be very hard to do anything creative, anything high performance.
I couldn't agree more. I think those are 3 beautiful and incredible ways to start at least getting in tune with who we are as people. And in my practice too, I think a little bit goes a long way. So
Yeah,
not
yeah,
thinking that we need to jump in and start doing an hour of journaling, but
right.
just maybe perhaps 3 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day. Start thinking about those questions, start just
Yeah.
including it into your daily routine, into your habits, and eventually into your performance. I think that's, yeah, incredible. Incredible conversation. Thank you so much for again taking the time out of your day. And
Thank you, Tobias. This has been really fun for me. I really appreciate it. And you're asking things that I haven't had to articulate before. And I mean, you're awesome at that. Thank you. I feel like I've learned a lot.